You know that feeling in a high-stakes meeting? The air conditioning is humming, everyone's looking really serious, and a new technology comes up on the agenda.
Hmm.
Maybe it's a new competitor or a vendor pitching some platform that promises the moon. And then someone at the table, usually the most sensible-looking person, right? Maybe the CFO leans back.
And says the magic words. Let's just wait and see.
Exactly. Let's let the dust settle. Let's not be the guinea pigs. And you can just feel the relief in the room. Everyone nods. It feels safe.
It feels responsible. It's sort of the standard operating procedure for corporate risk management.
Hmm.
But, and this is really why we're here today, we've been combing through a ton of white papers, strategy briefings, and they all point to a very different and honestly a pretty uncomfortable conclusion.
That feeling of safety.
Is a complete illusion, a hallucination.
And that is the hook for today's deep dive. We are looking at momentum over perfection. And the central thesis here is, well, it's going to keep some of you up at night. The research suggests waiting for AI to be perfect isn't the safe, conservative bet.
Not at all.
It's actually a high-risk gamble that your competitors are also just, standing still.
And spoiler alert,
Yeah.
they are not.
So, our mission today is to strip away all the technical hype. We are not talking about neural networks or GPU chips today. We're looking strictly at the business strategy. Why is caution suddenly a liability?
We're going to unpack why that whole tech switch idea is a myth, why you just can't buy intuition no matter how big your budget is, and we're going to explore this really scary concept called shadow AI.
Which might be happening in your company right now, whether you proved it or not.
Exactly.
But let's start with the psychology of it, because that wait-and-see instinct is powerful. I mean, playing devil's advocate here. Why shouldn't leaders wait? The headlines are messy. AI hallucinates. It leaks data. So if I'm a CEO, the logic is pretty clear. Why would I deploy a flawed tool? I'll wait for version 5.0. That sounds like good governance, doesn't it?
On the surface, yes, absolutely. If you're buying a car, you wouldn't buy one with 3 wheels. You'd wait for the finished product. But the sources we analyzed, they argue that this is a category error. Software isn't a car.
It's not a static asset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the documents draw a historical comparison here that I found really grounding. They talk about the early internet.
Right. Think back to 1995. Email was a total mess.
A mess. It was unreliable. Attachments didn't open half the time. Servers crashed constantly. But did smart companies say, you know what? We're going to stick to fax machines for another 10 years until this email thing is 100% reliable?
No, because if they did, they'd be dead by then.
Precisely. The companies that adopted email early, yeah, they dealt with the mess. But they also fundamentally changed how they communicated. They flattened hierarchies. They sped up information flow. By the time the perfect version of email arrived, those companies were operating at a completely different velocity.
So the argument is that leaders today are treating AI like a switch, like they can just sit on the sidelines, let everyone else make the mistakes, and then turn on the perfect AI in 2027 and just instantly catch up.
That is the switch fallacy. And the documents, they use a much better analogy. They don't call it a switch. They call it a muscle.
I highlighted this section. It really visualizes the problem. AI capability is a muscle.
Think about it. You can buy the best gym equipment in the world. You can buy the same shoes as an Olympian. But if you walk into the gym for the first time in 10 years, can you deadlift 300 pounds?
No, not without hurting myself. Probably pretty badly.
Exactly. You have to build the tissue. The sources argue that Company A, the one waiting for perfection, is just sitting on the couch. Company B is in the gym. They're sweating, they're struggling, they're dropping the weights sometimes.
They look messy.
They look very messy. But they are building what the white papers call learning velocity. They are figuring out how to integrate this stuff into actual workflows. The gap that opens up between the waiter and the doer, it isn't technological.
You can buy the tech later?
You can always buy the tech. The gap is operational and it's cultural.
This connects to that compounding cost of inaction paper we read. It made the point that if you wait 3 years, sure, you can buy the software. That's a check you can write.
But you cannot write a check for the 3 years of organizational learning they went through. You can't buy the mistakes they made and learn from. You can't buy the sort of calluses they developed from using the tool.
That's the scary part. Catching up becomes exponentially harder. It's not linear at all.
Right. And when the technology eventually does stabilize, when it becomes perfect, the early adopters aren't just starting their pilot programs.
They're scaling.
They are running at full speed while you're still trying to figure out how to tie your shoes.
This leads us right into the second big theme, which answers a question I think a lot of skeptics have. I can just hear someone thinking, okay, but the software changes every 6 months. Why should I spend time learning prompt engineering for a model that's going to be obsolete by Christmas?
It's a valid pushback. I mean, if the tool is disposable, why invest in the skill? It feels a little like learning to repair a VCR right before DVDs come out.
Exactly. Why bother?
But the sources, they make a really critical distinction here. The value isn't the software. The value is institutional intuition.
Institutional intuition. Okay, that sounds a bit abstract. Let's unwrap that. What does that actually look like on a Tuesday morning in the office?
It's about fluency. It's about a workforce that knows how to dance with the machine. The sources describe it as learning how to structure a query to get a useful answer. But even more importantly, and this is the part people miss, it's learning when not to trust the tool.
That really stood out to me. You're saying you only learn the limitations by actually hitting them.
Exactly. You can't build a governance framework in a vacuum. You can sit in a conference room and write a policy on AI safety, but it's just theory. Until your marketing team actually tries to use AI to draft a campaign and realizes, oh, wow, it just made up a fake customer testimonial, you don't really know where the risks live.
So the companies starting now are developing safeguards that are actually grounded in reality.
Battle-tested safeguards, as one source put it. The company's waiting. They're just relying on hypotheticals. They're trying to regulate a ghost.
It sounds like the difference between reading a book about swimming and actually jumping in the pool.
And swallowing a little water.
Yeah.
That's part of the process. The competitive advantage here is subtle, but it's massive. The sources mention that competitors who start early will eventually operate with lower marginal costs and, faster decision speeds.
So it's not just that they have better robots.
No. It's that their people have an intuitive sense of what the robots can and cannot do. And that is an asset you cannot buy off the shelf in 2027.
Okay, I want to pivot to what I think is the strongest counterargument. We can talk about learning muscles all day, but if the output is garbage, well, it's garbage. One of the papers, the momentum mandate, tackles this head on. It says, yes, AI hallucinates. Yes, it makes mistakes.
And we have to acknowledge that. If you need 100% accuracy, like, say, you're calculating the dosage for a heart medication, you don't use a probabilistic AI. Not yet, anyway.
Right. But most business isn't heart surgery.
And that is the aha moment. The text argues that AI does not need to outperform your best human expert to be valuable. It only needs to outperform your average process.
Ouch. I felt that one.
It's a bit brutal, isn't it?
It is. Because we all like to think our companies are these well-oiled machines. But if we're really being honest...
If we're honest, most internal business processes are painfully average. They're undocumented. They're inefficient. They rely on Bob from accounting remembering to forward an email before he goes on vacation. The bar for improvement is actually surprisingly low.
The sources mention a specific metric here, the 10-20% rule. What's that?
The data suggests that if AI improves output quality or speed by even just 10 to 20%, it creates a structural advantage. We aren't looking for a magic box that replaces your CEO. We're just looking for leverage.
Can you give us some specific use cases? Because I think people get stuck on that magic box idea. They think if it can't write the whole strategy, then it's useless.
It's the mundane stuff.
Yeah.
The sources list things like drafting the first version of a memo, summarizing 3 hours of meeting notes into a bulleted list.
Cleaning up messy data sets.
Exactly. And in all those cases, a human is still checking the work.
Always. That's the key.
Right. If the AI drafts a report and gets 80% of it right, and the human fixes the last 20%, you haven't just saved time. You've changed the cognitive load. You've moved the human from creator
to editor. I like that. It's always easier to edit a bad draft than to face a blank page.
Always. The goal isn't perfection. It's productivity. The sources emphasize that the companies winning with AI aren't using it to make final decisions on its own. They're using it to clear the clutter so humans can make better decisions faster.
So we've established that waiting leaves you behind on the learning curve and that you don't need perfection to get value. But there is a darker twist in these papers, a kind of irony about risk.
This is the shadow AI paradox.
It sounds like a spy thriller, shadow AI.
Yeah.
But it's actually something happening in our offices right now.
It is, and it's driven by that wait-and-see approach.
How so? Connect the dots for us. How does waiting create more risk?
Well, imagine you're a high-performing employee. You're ambitious, you want to get your work done fast. You know there are tools out there, free web-based tools that can summarize this 50-page PDF in seconds. But your company says, no, we're waiting. It's too risky.
So I, the dutiful employee, just sit and read the PDF for 3 hours.
Maybe you do. But the data shows that a massive percentage of employees don't. They just do it anyway. They copy the company data, paste it into a personal unsecured chatbot on their phone, get the summary, and paste it back into their work email.
And IT has no idea.
Zero visibility. This is shadow AI. By trying to keep the front door locked to manage risk, leadership has left the back window wide open.
And that seems infinitely more dangerous.
It is. Because now you have proprietary data leaving your secure environment, entering public models, potentially training future versions of those models. The expert consensus in these documents is clear. Managed experimentation with guardrails is far, far safer than blind prohibition.
It's the difference between abstinence-only education and actually teaching safety.
That's a very apt analogy. You can't stop the tide of efficiency. People want to do their jobs better. If you don't give them the tools, they will find their own, and you won't like the ones they find.
There's another layer to this risk, too, which is talent retention. The white papers mentioned this, and it really stuck with me. Top talent expects modern tools.
Absolutely. If you're a developer, a marketer, a strategist, and you join a company that blocks you from using the tools that make you 50% more effective, what does that signal?
That I've joined a dinosaur.
It signals that the organization is fighting the future. The sources explicitly state that blocking AI leads to retention issues. High performers will just leave for competitors who hand them a power drill instead of a screwdriver.
This bridges us perfectly into the cultural impact. We've talked about the hard strategy, the costs, the speed, the risk. But let's talk about the signal leadership sends when they decide to wait and see.
The sources are quite damning here. They argue that inaction sends a toxic message to the organization. It says, we don't experiment here, or we protect the status quo.
And that kills innovation in every department, not just tech.
It really does. In a world that's changing this fast, you want a culture of adaptability. You want a culture that's comfortable with ambiguity. When leadership pauses, they're essentially telling the team it's better to be slow and right than fast and learning.
But in this market, slow and right usually just means obsolete.
Exactly.
So what does the winning mindset look like? If we look at the organizations that are doing this right, the ones building that muscle, what are they doing differently? Because they're not just being reckless cowboys.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
They don't have perfect systems. That's the key takeaway. They have teams that have mastered collaboration with imperfect tools. They're navigating ambiguity, not trying to eliminate it.
Navigating ambiguity, that feels like a core leadership skill for the next decade.
It is the defining skill.
Yeah.
The sources emphasize that leadership during tech transitions isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating a safe space to find the answers. It's about saying, here's a tool, it's messy, it might lie to you, let's figure out how to use it safely to get better.
It's moving from a culture of compliance, just checking boxes, to a culture of curiosity.
Beautifully put. And that curiosity is what builds that institutional intuition we talked about earlier.
Okay, let's wrap this up by getting practical. The white papers don't just say, go fast and break things.
No, they are not advocating for recklessness. They're advocating for managed momentum.
So what's the first step? If I'm a leader listening to this and I've been in that wait-and-see camp, how do I shift gears without crashing the car?
The sources all suggest starting with low-stakes, high-value use cases. Don't let the AI negotiate your biggest contract. Don't let it write the press release for your earnings call.
Keep it away from the nuclear codes. Got it.
Exactly. Let it summarize the emails leading up to the negotiation. Let it draft internal newsletters. Let it sort through customer support tickets to find trends.
Safe sandboxes.
Yes. And treat the AI as an intern, not as an authority. The danger comes when people trust the output blindly. The learning happens when you critically evaluate the output. That's how you build the muscle.
Because, and this is a point from the compounding advantage source, progress compounds,
Yeah.
experience compounds. Waiting rarely does.
Right. The gap between you and your competitors isn't going to close itself. And remember, we are very good at measuring the risk of action. What if the software costs too much? What if it makes a mistake? We are very bad at measuring the risk of inaction.
What if we become irrelevant?
What if our cost structure becomes 20% higher than the competition because we didn't automate? That's the invisible cost, and it's the one that kills companies.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and I think we've successfully dismantled this idea that waiting is the safe play. I want to try to distill this down. If you're listening, what are the headlines you need to take back to the office?
I'd boil it down to 4 points.
Hit me.
First, waiting is not safe. It's an active, high-risk choice. You're betting that the world will stand still for you, and it won't.
Second, you can buy technology later, but you can't buy the learning curve. That intuition, that muscle of how to use AI, it takes time to build.
Third, stop looking for perfection. The benchmark is just your current average process. If AI can beat your average process, it's a win. Simple as that.
And finally, shadow AI is real. If you don't provide the tools and the governance, your team will find their own way, and that's a security nightmare waiting to happen.
Absolutely. Managed adoption is safer than blind prohibition. The tagline that really stuck with me from the source material, and I think this should be on a post-it on every executive's monitor, is this: AI doesn't reward perfection, it rewards momentum.
Momentum over perfection. So, here's the challenge for you listening. You don't need to overhaul your entire company by Monday. You just need to start. You need to get that muscle moving.
And I'll leave you with this final thought to mull over. We often ask, is AI good enough for my business yet? That's the wrong question.
What's the right question?
The sources suggest the real question you should be asking is, are you learning fast enough to matter when it is?
Are you learning fast enough? That is going to stick with me. A huge thank you for unpacking all of this, and thank you for listening. Now go start some imperfect experimentation. We'll see you on the next deep dive.